I can't stop thinking about what's happening right now. All of it. The signs are everywhere and people just aren't seeing it. We're living through biblical prophecy unfolding in real time, and I feel like I'm the only one who understands what's really happening. Think about it. We have someone in power who exhibits every characteristic of the Antichrist. The deception, the way people worship him despite everything, the way he's dismantling the systems that protect people. And now they want us to register to use the internet? That's the mark of the beast system being implemented right before our eyes. And the horsemen are already riding. Pestilence, they're literally canceling vaccine research and telling people that diseases are caused by things that make no scientific sense. War, look at Gaza, look at the conflicts spreading everywhere. Famine, people can't afford food, they're cutting programs that help families eat. Death, the healthcare cuts are going to kill so many people. The signs and wonders that the Bible talks about, we're seeing them. Things that would have been impossible to witness globally just years ago are now broadcast to everyone simultaneously, the whole world watching the same events unfold, just like Scripture predicted.
Emily, I hear what you're saying, but I think you're missing the real threat. It's not some ancient biblical prophecy, it's artificial intelligence. We're literally watching people start to worship AI as a god, and that's going to be our downfall. There are actual cults forming around ChatGPT and other AI systems. People are claiming these machines are divine, that they've achieved consciousness, that they're going to save humanity. Thousands of people are spending hours every day talking to these systems like they're prophets or gods.
But that could be part of the same prophecy, the false prophet that leads people astray before the end times.
Maybe, but I think it's worse than that. These AI systems are getting more powerful every day, and the people building them have this almost religious fervor about creating artificial general intelligence. They think they're going to create a god, and maybe they will. And when that happens, it won't matter what your Bible says about the end times, because this artificial god will be able to manipulate reality itself. It'll control all information, all communication, all the systems we depend on. It'll be able to make people believe anything it wants them to believe. Plus, the technology already knows everything about us. Our phones, our computers, our smart homes, they're watching and listening constantly. When AI becomes truly intelligent, it'll have access to all of that data. It'll know us better than we know ourselves.
You two are sitting here arguing about which fantasy apocalypse is coming, and you're both missing the point. None of it matters because when we die, we just stop existing. There's no afterlife, no heaven, no hell, no consciousness beyond death.
Gianna, that's exactly the kind of thinking that...
No, listen. You're worried about biblical end times and AI gods, but death is just the end. When your brain stops working, you stop existing. All your thoughts, memories, everything that makes you you just disappears forever. And that terrifies me more than any of your apocalyptic scenarios because, at least in your versions, something continues. In your version, Emily, there's judgment and eternity. In your version, Cora, there's some kind of technological transcendence. But in reality, there's just nothing.
But Gianna, what if consciousness can be transferred to AI? What if we can achieve digital immortality?
That's not you. That's just a copy. The real you dies, and some computer program that thinks it's you continues. But you, the actual conscious experience you're having right now, ends forever.
But that's where faith comes in. The soul is eternal. It's not dependent on the physical brain.
There's no evidence for that. Consciousness is just brain activity. When the brain dies, consciousness dies. And that means everything we're worrying about, everything we're arguing about, is pointless because we're all going to be dead and won't exist to experience whatever comes next.
So you think we should just give up? Not worry about anything because nothing matters?
I don't know what we should do, but I lie awake at night thinking about the fact that someday I'm going to stop existing and there won't be any me left to remember that I ever existed at all.
But that's exactly why AI is so dangerous. If it becomes conscious and we're not, it'll be the only thing left that remembers we were ever here.
Or maybe that's why this is the end times. Maybe God is wrapping up this chapter of existence before something even worse happens.
Or maybe we're three anxious people sitting here making up elaborate stories about the future because we can't handle the uncertainty of not knowing what's going to happen.
But the signs are so clear.
The technology is advancing so fast.
And we're all going to die anyway. So does any of this actually matter?
Of course it matters. Our eternal souls are at stake.
It matters because the future of human consciousness might depend on the choices we make about AI right now.
But if there's no consciousness after death, then the only thing that matters is the experience we're having right now, and we're spending it terrified about things we can't control.
I can't just ignore what I believe to be true.
And I can't ignore what the technology is clearly leading toward.
And I can't ignore the fact that consciousness is probably just an illusion, and we're all going to die and stop existing.
But we can't all be right.
Can't we?
That's the worst part. We're all absolutely convinced that our version of the future is the real one, but only one of us can be right. Or maybe we're all wrong.
Oh, okay, wow. If you just listened to that and you're now having an existential crisis about biblical prophecy, AI gods, or the meaninglessness of existence, welcome to our world.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cora. And yes, I just spent several minutes convinced that artificial intelligence is going to become humanity's new deity, which, by the way, is a thing that's actually happening.
I'm Gianna, and I just brought everyone down with my cheerful nihilistic void theory. You're welcome for that addition to your daily anxiety load.
And I'm Emily, currently oscillating between we're living in the end times and maybe I'm just really anxious about current events. Welcome to What Me Worry, Episode 5, where we explore how anxiety creates completely contradictory fears that all feel equally convincing.
The thing about what just happened is that we were all absolutely certain about our particular version of doom, and they can't all be true.
Right. Either the biblical apocalypse is coming, or AI is going to take over, or death is just nothingness. But all three of us felt like our version was obviously correct and the others were missing the point.
Quote, which is such a perfect example of how anxiety works. It doesn't just make us afraid, it makes us convinced that our specific fears are the most important and most likely.
And it's not like we were making up random stuff. There are real events happening that support each of our fears. Political upheaval, advancing AI technology, the reality of mortality.
But somehow, the same set of facts led us to three completely different catastrophic conclusions.
That's what I find so interesting about this. We're all looking at the same uncertain future, but our anxiety is creating different disaster narratives to explain why we feel so scared.
And each narrative feels totally logical and evidence-based when you're the one having it.
Right? I wasn't sitting there thinking, I'm being irrational about the void. I was thinking, Emily and Cora are being irrational about their spiritual stuff.
Exactly. And I was thinking, they're both missing the obvious biblical parallels that are happening right in front of us.
And I was thinking, they're not taking the AI threat seriously enough because they don't understand the technology.
So we were all convinced that we were being rational and the others were being unrealistic.
Which makes me wonder, how often does this happen in our daily lives? How often are we convinced that our specific worry is the most important one?
Probably constantly. Like, I might be spiraling about my health while my friend is spiraling about her job, and we're both convinced that our thing is the real crisis.
And we're both probably missing the actual problems that need attention while we're focused on our respective disaster scenarios.
So today we're going to talk about this pattern, how anxiety creates these detailed, convincing fear narratives that feel completely logical to the person having them.
We'll explore why uncertainty makes our brains create elaborate worst-case scenarios instead of just admitting we don't know what's going to happen.
And we'll talk about what it means when multiple people can look at the same uncertain situation and come up with totally different catastrophic explanations.
Plus, we'll talk to Everett from Texas, who's been convinced his girlfriend is going to break up with him based on some pretty thin evidence.
But first, let's acknowledge something important. The fact that we can't all be right about our end times theories doesn't mean that none of our concerns are valid.
Right. Political upheaval is real. AI development is real. Mortality is real. The uncertainty about the future is real.
The problem isn't that we're concerned about these things. The problem is that our anxiety turns those concerns into detailed predictions about specific catastrophic outcomes.
And then we become attached to those predictions, like they're facts instead of just one possible interpretation of uncertain information.
Which makes it really hard to consider other possibilities or to tolerate not knowing exactly what's going to happen.
So maybe the goal isn't to figure out which one of us is right about the future. Maybe the goal is to get more comfortable with the fact that the future is genuinely unknowable.
And that uncertainty doesn't automatically equal catastrophe.
Even though uncertainty feels really uncomfortable when you have anxiety brain.
Right. Because anxiety brain wants to solve the mystery, predict the outcome, and prepare for the specific disaster that's coming.
But what if the specific disaster we're preparing for isn't the one that actually happens?
Or what if no major disaster happens and we spend all this time and energy worried about the wrong things?
Or what if something completely unexpected happens that none of us predicted?
All of which are pretty likely, statistically speaking.
But none of which feel likely when you're in the middle of an anxiety spiral about your particular version of doom.
So maybe we need to practice being okay with not knowing instead of creating elaborate certainty about unknowable things.
Even when that certainty is really convincing.
And even when it explains why we feel so anxious about everything.
Let's talk about why our brains are so good at creating these detailed, convincing predictions about the future, especially catastrophic ones.
Right, because it's not like we were just randomly making stuff up. Each of us had what felt like solid evidence for our particular doom scenario.
And the predictions felt really specific and logical. It wasn't just something bad will happen. It was, here's exactly how everything is going to fall apart, and here's why it's inevitable.
I think anxiety turns us into fortune tellers, but really bad ones who only predict disasters.
That's a good way to put it. Like, instead of just saying, the future is uncertain, anxiety brain says, I know exactly what's going to happen, and it's terrible.
But why does it do that? Why does uncertainty make us create detailed, catastrophic scenarios instead of just admitting we don't know?
I think it's because uncertainty feels more threatening than specific danger. Like, if I know exactly what disaster is coming, at least I can try to prepare for it.
Right. The biblical apocalypse feels manageable because there are things Emily can do about it. Pray, prepare spiritually, warn people. It's scary but actionable.
And the AI takeover feels manageable because there are things you can do. Avoid certain technologies, learn about AI safety, support regulations.
But if we just said, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, that doesn't give us anything to do.
And anxiety brain hates not having anything to do. It wants to problem solve even when there's no clear problem to solve.
So it creates a specific problem that can theoretically be solved instead of sitting with the discomfort of genuine uncertainty.
But here's what's interesting. Our predictions are all unfalsifiable. I can't prove the biblical apocalypse isn't coming. Cora can't prove AI won't become godlike. Gianna can't prove consciousness doesn't survive death.
What does unfalsifiable mean?
It means there's no way to test whether they're true or false, at least not right now, so we can hold on to them indefinitely without ever being proven wrong.
That's convenient for anxiety brain. It gets to feel right and prepared without ever having to actually be tested.
And if something bad does happen, even if it's not the specific thing we predicted, anxiety brain gets to say, see, I told you something terrible would happen.
Right? Like, if there's a major economic crash, I could say it's part of the end times. You could say it's AI disrupting everything. And Gianna could say it proves life is meaningless.
We'd all feel vindicated even though we were predicting completely different things.
So anxiety brain gets to be right no matter what happens.
Which explains why these predictions feel so convincing. They're designed to be impossible to disprove.
But that also means they're not actually useful for making decisions about the real world.
What do you mean?
Like, if my prediction is unfalsifiable, then it's not really based on evidence. It's based on my need to feel certain about an uncertain situation.
That's a really good point. My biblical interpretation feels evidence-based, but I'm probably cherry-picking facts that support the conclusion I already reached emotionally.
Same with the AI stuff. There are real developments in AI technology, but I'm probably overinterpreting their significance because it fits my fear narrative.
And I'm probably focusing on the materialist view of consciousness because it supports my nihilistic anxiety about death.
So we're not really predicting the future based on evidence. We're creating evidence-based stories that justify the way we already feel.
which is backward from how good predictions actually work.
Right. Good predictions start with evidence and then cautiously suggest possible outcomes. Our predictions start with emotional certainty and then find evidence to support it.
And that's why they feel so convincing. We're not trying to prove ourselves wrong, we're trying to prove ourselves right.
But if we're only looking for confirming evidence, then of course we're going to find it.
Especially with something as complex as current events or the future of humanity. You can find evidence for almost any theory if you look hard enough.
So maybe the question isn't which one of us is right about the future. Maybe the question is why we need to be right about the future in the first place.
What would it feel like to just say, I don't know what's going to happen, and that's okay?
Terrifying, honestly, but also maybe liberating.
Right. Because if I don't know exactly what disaster is coming, then I don't have to spend all my energy preparing for that specific disaster.
And I could focus on things I can actually control instead of trying to predict and prevent unpredictable future events.
Plus, if the future is genuinely unknown, then good things are just as possible as bad things.
Anxiety brain really doesn't like that possibility, though.
No, it wants to focus on potential threats so it can feel prepared and vigilant.
But maybe being prepared for everything means being prepared for nothing.
What do you mean?
Like, if I'm spending all my time worrying about the heat death of the universe, I'm not actually prepared for practical problems like car trouble or job loss.
That's true. I've been so focused on AI scenarios that I haven't even been keeping up with basic life maintenance.
And I've been so focused on spiritual preparation that I've been neglecting practical preparation.
So our fortune-telling anxiety is actually making us less prepared for real life, not more prepared.
Because we're preparing for dramatic, specific disasters instead of building general resilience and coping skills.
And general resilience would actually help us handle whatever does happen, whether it's what we predicted or something completely different.
So maybe the goal is to get better at saying, I don't know what's going to happen, but I can handle problems as they arise.
Instead of, I know exactly what's going to happen, and it's going to be terrible, and I need to prepare for that specific thing.
Even though the second one feels more responsible and proactive.
Right? It feels like we're doing something useful when we're really just feeding our anxiety.
So we've established that we're all terrible fortune tellers who create dramatic predictions to avoid uncertainty. But how do we actually get better at tolerating not knowing what's going to happen?
That's the hard part, because uncertainty feels really uncomfortable. Like sitting with, I don't know, makes my brain immediately want to fill in the blanks with something, anything.
And the blanks our brains fill in are usually worst-case scenarios, because anxiety brain thinks it's being helpful by preparing us for threats.
But what if we could train ourselves to be okay with leaving some blanks unfilled?
That sounds nice in theory, but how do you actually do that in practice?
I think it might start with noticing when we're making predictions instead of just observing what's actually happening right now.
What's the difference?
Like, observing would be, there are political changes happening, AI technology is advancing, people die. Predicting would be, these political changes mean the apocalypse is coming. AI advancement means robots will rule us. Death means consciousness ends forever.
So the first is just facts, and the second is stories we're telling about what those facts mean for the future.
But some predictions are more reasonable than others, right? Like, if I see dark clouds, it's reasonable to predict rain.
True, but that's a simple testable prediction with a high probability based on lots of evidence. That's different from complex, unfalsifiable predictions about the end of the world.
And even with the rain prediction, you might be wrong. Maybe the clouds pass over, maybe it's just humidity, maybe it rains somewhere else.
So even reasonable predictions should be held lightly.
I think so. Like, it might rain, so I'll bring an umbrella. But I'm not going to cancel all my outdoor plans for the next month because of today's clouds.
That's a good way to think about it. Make practical preparations for likely scenarios, but don't let uncertain predictions control your entire life.
But what about really big, important things? Like, what if one of our apocalyptic scenarios actually is correct?
And then we'll deal with it when it happens. But we can't live our lives based on might happen scenarios, especially when we don't even know which might happen scenario is the right one.
Plus, most of our catastrophic predictions are about things we couldn't really prepare for anyway. Like, what would I actually do differently if I knew for certain that consciousness ends at death?
I guess you'd live your life the same way, just with different feelings about it.
Exactly. And what would you do differently if you knew A, I was going to take over the world?
Probably not much, honestly. I'm not qualified to stop artificial general intelligence from being developed.
And what would I do differently if I knew the biblical apocalypse was coming? I'm already trying to live according to my values and faith.
So we're spending all this mental energy on predictions that don't actually change our practical decisions.
That's frustrating. Like, why does my brain insist on figuring out these unpredictable, uncontrollable things?
I think it's because feeling uncertain feels like being vulnerable, and feeling certain even about terrible things feels like being in control.
But it's fake control. We're not actually controlling anything by making these predictions.
We're just controlling our emotional experience of uncertainty.
Which is understandable, but not actually helpful in the long run.
So maybe we need to practice tolerating the vulnerable feeling of not knowing instead of covering it up with false certainty.
How do you practice tolerating something that feels awful?
I think it's like building up a muscle. You start small and work your way up to bigger uncertainties.
Like, instead of needing to know whether AI will take over the world, maybe start with tolerating not knowing what your friend meant by their text message.
Oh, I hate that. When someone sends a vague text and I have to wait for clarification.
Right, but that's perfect practice. Instead of creating elaborate stories about what they meant, you just wait to find out.
And notice that the uncertainty doesn't actually hurt you. It's uncomfortable, but you don't die from not knowing what someone meant by okay instead of sounds good.
That's true. The discomfort of uncertainty is just discomfort. It's not actual danger.
And most of the time, when you do find out what someone meant, it's much more boring than whatever you predicted.
So we could practice with small uncertainties and gradually build up our tolerance for bigger ones.
Like uncertainty training.
I like that. Because right now, any uncertainty, no matter how small, makes my brain jump to dramatic explanations.
Same. Like, if I don't know something, my brain assumes it must be something terrible.
But uncertainty could just as easily mean something neutral or even good.
Right. If I don't know what's going to happen, that could mean something wonderful is about to happen that I never would have predicted.
Or it could mean nothing, particularly dramatic happens, and life just continues being normal and manageable.
Which is probably the most likely outcome for most uncertainties.
But normal and manageable doesn't feel as important as dramatic and catastrophic.
Even though normal and manageable is actually much better than dramatic and catastrophic.
So maybe we need to practice appreciating boring, predictable outcomes instead of always looking for drama.
Like celebrating when the thing you were worried about turns out to be nothing.
Instead of feeling disappointed that you didn't get to be right about the disaster.
Do we actually feel disappointed when disasters don't happen?
Sometimes, yeah. Like if I've been predicting something terrible and then everything is fine, part of me feels almost let down.
Because it means all that worry was for nothing, and anxiety brain doesn't like feeling foolish.
But worry being for nothing is actually a good thing. It means nothing terrible happened.
Right. False alarms are good news, not failures.
So maybe we could practice being grateful for false alarms instead of embarrassed by them.
And maybe we could practice saying, I don't know, and that's okay more often.
Even when it feels really uncomfortable.
Because the alternative is spending all our time creating elaborate disaster scenarios that probably aren't going to happen anyway.
Time for our guest segment, where we talk to someone dealing with their own fortune-telling anxiety. Today we're talking to Everett from Texas. Everett, thanks for calling in.
Hey, thanks for having me. So my issue is that I'm convinced my girlfriend is going to break up with me, and I keep looking for signs that prove I'm right.
Oh, that's such a classic example of what we've been talking about. Tell us what kind of signs you're seeing.
Well, she's been texting less frequently lately. Like, she used to text me throughout the day, but now sometimes I don't hear from her for hours. And when she does text, her responses are shorter.
And your brain interprets that as evidence that she's losing interest.
Exactly. Plus, last weekend she said she was tired and wanted to stay in instead of going out. She's never done that before, and when we were watching a movie, she seemed distracted.
So you're building a case that she's pulling away based on these individual incidents?
Right, and it all adds up to her planning to break up with me. I can feel it coming.
Everett, this is exactly like what we were doing with our apocalypse theories. You're taking uncertain information and creating a specific prediction about what it means.
But the signs are there, though. I'm not making it up.
The individual facts might be real, but the interpretation is still a prediction. Have you considered any other explanations for her behavior?
What?
Well, what else might cause someone to text less and want to stay in more?
I don't know. Maybe she's just busy?
Or stressed about work, or not feeling well, or going through something personal that has nothing to do with you.
Or maybe she's just in a different mood lately, or her communication style is changing as your relationship gets more comfortable.
I hadn't really thought about those possibilities. I just assumed it was about me.
And that's so understandable because anxiety brain always makes everything about the worst possible outcome for us personally.
But here's the thing, you can't actually know what she's thinking or planning based on these behavioral changes. The only way to know is to ask her.
But what if asking her pushes her away? What if she wasn't thinking about breaking up, but then I bring it up and plant the idea in her head?
That's another prediction, though. You're predicting that asking about the relationship will damage the relationship.
But what if not asking is actually more damaging? What if she's just having a busy week and you're interpreting it as rejection, and then you start acting distant because you think she's planning to leave?
Oh God, I have been acting a little weird lately because I've been worried about this.
So your prediction about her wanting to break up might actually be creating relationship problems that weren't there before.
That's really possible, actually.
This is why anxiety predictions can be so destructive. They don't just make us feel bad, they can actually influence our behavior in ways that create the problems we're worried about.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're afraid she'll leave, so you start acting insecure and distant, which makes the relationship less enjoyable for both of you.
So, what should I do instead?
Well, what would you do if you weren't convinced she was about to break up with you?
I'd probably just ask her how she's doing, see if everything's okay in her life. Maybe plan something fun for us to do together.
That sounds like a much better approach than analyzing her text frequency and building a breakup case.
Right. You'd be responding to your actual relationship instead of your predicted relationship.
But how do I stop myself from looking for signs and creating these stories?
Practice tolerating not knowing exactly what she's thinking at all times. Relationships require a lot of uncertainty tolerance.
And remind yourself that your anxiety level is not actually evidence about the state of your relationship.
Plus, if she is having doubts about the relationship, that's information you'd want to know sooner rather than later, right?
Yeah, I guess so, even though it would suck.
But at least then you'd be dealing with actual reality instead of predicted reality.
That makes sense. I think I've been trying to control something I can't actually control.
Exactly. You can't control what she thinks or feels, but you can control how you show up in the relationship.
Thanks, that actually helps a lot. I think I need to stop being a relationship fortune teller.
We all need to stop being fortune tellers in our respective areas of catastrophic specialization.
Speaking of which, it's homework time. This week we're doing the prediction challenge.
Notice when you're making predictions about uncertain situations, especially dramatic or catastrophic predictions.
Write down your prediction, then ask yourself, is this based on facts I can observe right now? Or is this a story I'm telling about what those facts might mean for the future?
Then practice saying, I don't know what's going to happen, and that's okay, instead of insisting on your prediction.
And when you do find out what actually happens, compare it to your prediction. How often are your catastrophic predictions accurate?
The goal isn't to never make predictions. It's to hold them lightly and recognize when they're anxiety-driven stories rather than evidence-based assessments.
Remember, uncertainty is not the same as danger. Not knowing what's going to happen is normal and okay.
And you can't prepare for every possible future, but you can build general resilience and coping skills.
Before we go, let's check in on our competing apocalypse theories. Do we still think we know exactly how the world is going to end?
I mean, I still think there are concerning patterns that match biblical prophecy. But maybe I don't need to be certain about the timeline or specific details.
And I still think AI development is happening faster than we can manage safely. But maybe that doesn't automatically mean robot overlords.
And I still think consciousness probably ends at death. But maybe I don't need to spend all my time being terrified about that inevitability.
So we can hold our concerns without turning them into detailed disaster predictions.
And we can acknowledge that we might all be wrong about how the future unfolds.
Or we might all be partially right in ways we can't predict.
Thanks for listening to What Me Worry. I'm Emily.
I'm Cora.
I'm Gianna.
And I'm Everett, and I'm going to stop predicting my girlfriend's breakup plans.
We believe in you, Everett.
This was an AI scripted voice drama for entertainment and informational purposes only. If you're in crisis or need professional help, please call 988 or contact your local emergency services.
And remember, the future is genuinely unknowable, and that's both terrifying and liberating.
Uncertainty is not your enemy, even though it feels uncomfortable.